Charles, a widowed fisherman, is taken aback when criminals entered his home. A large battle broke out, but it was too late to flee when they discovered what was truly inside the older man's home. Without a doubt, pets are a man's best friend. Practically no one questions their pet's love for them, and we would like to believe that it would do anything for us. But what about a wild animal, one that is not used to collars or humans? Would it also be capable of loyalty and devotion like an ordinary dog or cat? The answer to this question can be found in the touching story of Charles and his unusual pet. Charles was recently retired and the newest resident of a mountainous area in Canada. He had worked his entire life in the chemical industry in a large Canadian city, which over the years had greatly damaged his health, leaving him debilitated and forced to leave due to pollution in the air. Charles moved to a remote region of Canada, surrounded by mountains beautifully covered in snow during the harsh Canadian winter. His desire to live there had always been, but work did not permit it, so he had to wait for his retirement. The gentleman loved to fish. With all those frozen lakes and clean and pure air, if you closed your eyes for a few seconds, you could imagine that you were in paradise. He felt united with nature, as if everything was just an extension of his body. He fished for his food daily in the frozen rivers and lakes, and while buying his baits and lures, as he did every morning in a local market, he heard a small grunt coming from the direction of some garbage cans. He got closer and saw a gray wolf puppy, a common species in the area. Nevertheless, the pensioner had never seen one up close. They were beautiful as well as frightening. As Charles got closer, the wolf started to growl very loudly, and Charles quickly figured out why. The animal was interested in and hungry for his lures. The old man, realizing the hunger of the little animal, takes out a portable knife from his kit, cuts off a piece of the bait, and feeds it from afar to the beast, which nips his finger as he grabs the food. After feeding, the old gray-haired, slow-walking gentleman wondered what he would do with the beast. He knew that if he left it there in that state, it wouldn't last long and could even serve as food for other mountain animals. Charles decides to lure the wolf into one of his bags with one more piece of bait and take it home. When he arrives at the small hut, the wolf gets out of the bag and walks a few meters with a limp, and then the man notices a minor fracture in his hind leg. Incredibly, the gray wolf pup is very calm inside the house. The lit fireplace, the large rug in the center of the room, and the warmth the fireplace gave off calmed the animal. So calm that it allowed the man to tend to its wound. Charles lived alone and sat in his cabin almost all day, reading books and practicing one of his favorite hobbies in a small woodworking room that he had built himself. He had no family, and his severe cough, shortness of breath, and diabetes greatly impaired the old man's life, so he moved to this place as a last refuge. To recover, the wolf stayed in the old hut for 8 days, and on the 9th day, he came out with Charles when the latter went out for his daily fishing trip. Unfortunately, however, the ferocious animal ran into the vast pine forest as soon as the man opened the cabin door, causing the man to lose sight of him in a matter of seconds. "Go in peace, my dear. I hope you enjoyed your stay," Charles said wistfully. In this way, the pensioner moved on with his life. He continued to do his daily and morning fishing and no longer complained about the cold, which bothered his joints when he was still adapting to the climate. But he couldn't deny that he missed his cabin mate. He was very lonely, and the animal's company, even if only for a few days, renewed the old man's energy. After that, Charles met his friend periodically almost every time he left the house to go to the market, to go fishing, or when he sat looking out the window of his cabin and could observe the ferocious animal howling on top of a mountain near his residence. The wolf, growing little by little but still small compared to adult wolves, was always on the prowl, watching his dear friend. Sometimes it was possible to observe footprints near his home, indicating the animal's stealthy trail. One day he saw about 12 of them, some adults and some smaller, up the mountain, and remarked what a beautiful picture that was. "Almost a painting that should be in the best museums," he whispered in awe, remembering why he lived in that region. He had no neighbors, living in a cabin, isolated from the city and the people, close to nature, just as he liked it. So he didn't worry too much about always locking his door when entering the house or closing his windows, which he liked to leave open on days when it wasn't snowing. And it was on one of these that he left his door unlocked, and 2 young men broke into his modest cottage. They had been watching him for a few weeks and realized that he was always alone and couldn't pose any danger to them by how he walked. The gentleman never imagined that something like this could happen to him. Who would rob a pensioner in such a remote place like this? even more so one who has nothing to offer, he thought. However, that unlikely scenario was about to happen. The young men surrounded Charles, who was frightened and surprised. He thought briefly about reacting, but the invaders outnumbered him, and in his fragile state of health, he could do very little, so he decided against it. They asked if the hut had any secret compartments or safes, at which point the pensioner couldn't hold back and let out a small laugh from the corner of his mouth. "I can't even support myself here, boy. Imagine having a safe. What a waste of money," he said ironically to the robber, who angrily showed the old man that he was armed with a wooden stick. He hits Charles in the legs, who falls and starts coughing, making noise and showing all his fragility. The robbers then ask him if he has anything of value they could take, such as money saved or jewelry. The elderly pensioner said nothing, but his expression gave him away. The moment the bandit asked if he had any expensive items, he almost instinctively glanced at a cabinet above him, giving away the place where his only item of real value was. It was a gold watch which had been given to the gentleman by his late wife some years ago. It was a golden wedding gift, and the woman decided not to skimp and gave the beautiful gift to her beloved husband. However, she had never used it, leaving it intact and still in its original box, which seemed perfect to the burglars. The robbers located the luxurious watch. They were satisfied with it and already considered the invasion a success. Charles was disgusted, not because of the price of the watch. The modest man did not care about that, but because it was the last memory of his deceased wife. The man, with great effort, managed to stand up and went after the criminals, hoping to strike a lucky blow. The invaders were surprised at the perseverance this gentleman had. He knew he had no chance against two young men, but even so, he would not let himself be robbed without fighting for what was his. Just as they were about to take down the old gentleman again, a loud growl echoed in the living room. "Quick, go check what that was," says one of the men to the other as he holds the resident of the old cottage hostage in his old woodworker's room. Upon reaching the room, the man screams in terror. He faced angry gray wolves, who began to take a position surrounding the man. They were ready to attack. At the cry of his accomplice, the other man runs into the room and is confronted with an unbelievable scene. His colleague is being attacked by a huge pack. This time, it was young and small wolves and full-grown adult wolves inside the enclosure. The old man could only see the silhouettes that were casting a shadow, thanks to the fireplace that was lit in the room. Seeing his colleague being attacked by those beasts, the man cowardly pulls out a gun. He runs toward the room Charles was in, abandoning his partner in crime and trying to find a back door as fast as possible to escape what had become a living hell for him and his partner. A few wolves from the pack follow the man into the room. Among them, one with a black spot on his hind paw. Charles recognized it immediately. It was his faithful companion who was willing to return an old favor. In a quick dash, the wolf advances toward the invader, who reflexively pulls the trigger repeatedly. But due to a defect, his gun fires only once, then jams. Charles cannot believe his own eyes. The old man reaches desperately for the telephone and calls the local police while he tries to staunch the beast's wound, which was already breathing slowly. He bandages the animal while the larger wolves ensure that the intruders do not escape by holding them by the ankle. Charles then realizes that it is already too late. His hero has left him. Charles sits down on the ground and tries to resuscitate the ferocious predator, but to no avail. Nothing can be done. The police finally arrive on the scene and take the invaders into custody. Charles retrieves his watch but cannot hide his sadness. He still couldn't understand how he could have made such a sincere and strong bond with the wild animal, to the point that he risked his own life to save the poor man. When everyone had left and the small hut was empty, Charles buried the animal on top of a mountain near his house, where he and his pack used to spend the nights, giving him a beautiful view of the frozen valley. From that day on, whenever the old man looked out the window of his hut, he felt the presence of a faithful friend. If you liked the story, I ask you to please leave a like, and this other video that is appearing on the screen now will probably move you as well. Have a good session, and see you in the next video.